Mini episode 401 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.info.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
30 seconds.
In front of all these people, you're going to pull out a gun and you're going to shoot an unarmed man.
20 seconds.
So what are you going to do?
10.
Welcome to the FDH Lounge and the Justified episode recap.
It was justified.
With your original dignitaries,
Fire now!
Rick Morris and Jason Jones.
You got ice cold water running through your veins.
Breaking down each Justified episode the moment they've concluded.
Did you take a peek inside the soul of Raven and you?
I'm just gonna let that old dog lie.
Real-time reactions. Next level analysis.
You seem to be harboring a bit of hostility there, brother.
So I've been told.
And now, your dignitaries.
Well, I believe we can take her from here.
Welcome, everyone, to mini episode number 401 of the FDH Lounge. Rick Morris and Jason Jones, your FDH Lounge original dignitaries, giving you the breakdown, as we see it, of episode 5.11 of Justified, a real big one. We were talking at the end of 510 last week that big things were going to need to happen the rest of the way in order to really redeem this season, give it a chance to be as great as season 4. And then when I say redeem this season, I say make it a great season, not just a good season, because that's the standards that we have for this show. Tonight was pretty big. I don't know if it was quite on the level of 5.5, but it was pretty big and huge implications the rest of the way. Can't wait to hear the thoughts of my man, FDH Senior Editor Jason Jones. Jason, your thoughts on an explosive episode that started with the shooting of Art Mullen in the cold open and went from there.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're not going to have enough time to hit everything, but my initial response to what you just said is it may not have had the visceral reaction moment to moment as 5.5 did, but I think the big moments were more important in this one. I was surprised they put so much into one. I mean, I literally have a big, major, holy crap moment for pretty much every major player in this episode.
True. Absolutely true in that regard. As far as following through the course of the season, do you have any kind of criticism along the lines of, because I kind of do, to be honest, in my head. We've talked about this. The season has been kind of opaque. It's been a little foggy as it's been going. You could see seasons 2, 3, and 4, I think, to whatever degree kind of materializing. We're here in 5.11, and there were big developments, but I don't necessarily know how we got here. I mean, we found out at the end the fact that Daryl actually was the one that shot Art and that his pact, the blood brother deal with Kendall last week, I guess that was part of putting Kendall up to that, to taking the rap for it. But again, I don't quite know how we got to this point of him shooting Art. I guess it was supposed to be a revenge for the Danny Crow death that we had seen. But and I don't know that this Picker thing of his hostility towards Boyd, okay, maybe it's what happens in the aftermath of a drug deal gone bad, but that kind of feels hot-shotted. We haven't really had the tension between Picker and Boyd until very, very recently. Do you have any criticism whatsoever of the way that it's going in terms of not necessarily knowing how to trace how we got to this point?
Well, I think that's the big creative difference between Season 5 and all the others. And maybe that has to do with the fact that the creator was in on the first 4 series, and unluckily for us, that's no longer the case. Because every other season, maybe with the exception of the first half of Season 1, everything sort of kind of just built in a linear way. It was just sort of like one thing after the other, to the point where when you got to episode 10 or 11 or even 12, you kind of felt like we were hitting a crescendo. This one's all over the place. You have, like, the 5th episode of this season was phenomenal, and when we discussed it, even said it may be up there with Convoy, and that it may be one of the top 5 best episodes of the series, period. But that was the 5th episode, and it's not like it was a Christmas episode or a halfway mid-season finale or anything. It was just strange. It's all over the place. It's probably going to continue to be all over the place because stylistically that just seems to be what they're doing. With that said, though, it may make for a tremendous finale because we don't know what's going to happen. And to be honest, if you would have said Art was going to get shot and that the Crows would somehow have something to do with that, I would have assumed that is second to last episode or last episode of the season because that's major.
You know, I have to give you a lot of credit. You put your finger on it in a better way than I enunciated as far as saying in a linear fashion. That's exactly what it is. I give you a lot of credit because that's what I was thinking in my head, but it didn't quite come out of my mouth that way. This has been the least linear, I think, of all of the seasons, with the possible exception of one, which was kind of built around procedurals, at least the first half of the season. And again, I really think in looking at this, that the structure of it, again, really has been kind of different. By the way, you said convoy for 410 there. I'm afraid I brainwashed you with my brain fart from a few weeks ago. Yes, that's hilarious. You wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for my brain fart, which just makes it funnier.
The funny thing is, I paused, and for a second I went, I'm 95% sure that it's decoy. Yeah, it is what it is.
You did what I did a few weeks ago. It's hilarious. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the theme of the shooting of Art Mullen before we move to anything else for this episode, because there's two things that come to mind. One is, and you may have heard this, so you and I are not necessarily viewers of this show. I'm not. Maybe you have been. The Good Wife, have you ever watched that show?
No. The sad thing is there's people on that show that I do like because they've done some work with Sorkin, and it seems like the kind of cast I'd be into. But there's just something about that show that tells me I probably wouldn't enjoy it. And I might be wrong, but no, I've never seen it. Yeah,
well, spoiler alert, the sports night guy bit it. But what happened was, and again, that's which you're probably not going to watch. Guy? Josh Charles. And that's why I'm bringing it up. It was a very shocking death from Sunday night. It's very much in my head because it really destabilized the viewers of the show because they were led to believe he was going to be part of the end game of the series. And everything kind of got turned on its head. To a certain extent, the deaths in Game of Thrones were kind of the same way, the whole Red Wedding thing that happened there, that it really kind of shocked people. So this is not the first time that this has happened. And like I said, it's very... Okay, go ahead.
First, when did you become a Game of Thrones viewer, or are you just doing tremendous research to make your point?
No. I'm just throwing that out. I haven't watched it yet. I will watch it probably quasi-spoiled the same way that I did with The Shield, just because I haven't been able to avoid it. But I'm just saying that this has been a thing of throwing out kind of shocking deaths. And like I said, with The Good Wife happening just Sunday night, it's very much apparent in my mind. Because The Good Wife, for whatever else we might say about it, that's probably about as close to TV snob quality as we get from the networks these days. That's everything that I've ever heard about that show. So it's maybe a little bit similar in that way, the shocking death of a character and having Art hovering between life and death here at this point. But while I've probably exhausted my Shield crossover comparisons, I want to make one to Breaking Bad. I'm going to have to tread lightly here on what I'm going to refer to since you haven't watched the very end of the series yet. But here's the thing. You know, Jason, as does anybody else who would be spoiled by the exact nature of this, you know something horrific happens at the end of Breaking Bad. You don't know to whom. You don't know what it is. Something horrible happens. But it's the consequences you know are coming, right? When you sign up to watch Breaking Bad, you're signing on the dotted line, okay, look, this sense of dread is going to follow me all the way through, and in the end it's going to get paid off pretty badly. I'm going to posit to you, that's not what I signed up for or Justified. If Art Mullen dies, this is a darker ride than what any of us signed up for. There's hardly any redemption for Raylan Givens if Art dies. because his widow will, if she would be his widow under those circumstances, she would be right. This is on Raylan. We've talked about this, that, okay, Raylan manned up, he let Art punch him in the face, whatever. But you know what? At the end of the day, Raylan could not shake off the whole emo thing, carrying around his troubles, being the brooding loner. If Art dies before Raylan had a chance to make it right with him, that's not the show I signed up to watch. I'm not saying I jump off the bandwagon. I'm not saying I hate the show. I'm not going to say I'm going to stop following it or stop doing this, because I won't. I'll still enjoy it. But I think it fundamentally changes the show from what we've expected it to be, and it makes it a much darker story if he dies. Do you agree with me?
I agree with the basic overall idea. I just come to it from a different angle. And about the Breaking Bad thing, that helps, believe it or not, set up what I want to say. The Breaking Bad situation, and I don't know what happens. Let's just, and don't react just in case I'm wrong, but let's just say that it is my opinion that there's no way that show ends with Walter walking off into the sunset to a retirement community, okay? I think there's no way that show ends without Walter dying, in probably not a very nice way. And that brings me to the Justified angle, in that I think this is one of those opportunities that the creators, the writers, whoever, look at it and say, how many times have we mentioned that Art is this close to retirement, and that eventually he's going to have to pick a successor or suggest one? What does that mean for the show when he walks away? All these things have been said enough that it's almost like I think that the writers kind of went, well, if he's that close, we've at least got to tempt the audience with an assassination or an attack on his life. Now, I don't think for even a second that he's going to die. Because I think it's so much more impactful storyline-wise that he's on the brink and comes back, maybe not to run the office anymore, but he survives to sort of force Raylan's hand in some form of contrition or something. So I agree with you that if Art dies, it's a big problem. I would have a problem with that direction. But I think this is another example of the writers doing a thing just to mess with us in order to further a certain storyline.
I think you're right, and again, I think it's because it would be so damaging to the telling of the story. It would be a fundamental reordering of what we've been watching. I've seen some clips online of Tim Oliphant and talking to the great Walton Goggins about the program, and about how they try to mix in a lot of dark comedy to it and make that a part of it as well. I mean, anything except real darkness, you're going to have a hard time getting it out of your head. It's going to color every conversation you ever see with Art and with Raylan subsequently. If you know that Raylan, through whatever part of his bullheadedness in terms of not apologizing to Art, making it right, again, Raylan did what he had to do in the whole Nikki Augustine situation. You and I have said this. But being a man is also acknowledging that you have to make it right. You did break the rules. You did transgress in doing that. And to go the extra mile to try to make it up to Art for the position that he put him in. So I agree with you because I think it would be so damaging to the show, and I think they would realize that it would really just change the fabric of it if Art died. I really wanted to run that theory past you because it's something I've been thinking about all week, having been spoiled by this, going back and watching what happened. Now, again, last week with the runover, I didn't see the coming attractions in real time, neither did you. So we did all of our 5-10 review without anticipating what was going to happen this week. I texted you about a day or so ago. Did you go back and watch the coming attractions, or did you go into tonight completely unspoiled?
I did not on purpose. It's almost become a thing now. It's like, Rick says that something's going to happen, so this is my cue to ignore anything and not to go to any websites or read any speculation whatsoever so that I can have a nice, authentic reaction.
Well, I'm sure your reaction was as authentic as always to what happened here. And again, the question that I have, and we won't know the answer about this necessarily, this is a show that they don't really kayfabe as much as Mad Men. Mad Men is almost comical on their coming attractions. Matthew Weiner really hates the fact that he has to put anything out there, so he'll put out the most convoluted stuff imaginable, clips from conversations that mean nothing, and try to get people ginned up all week thinking what's going to happen, and it'll turn out that everything that is said by a character was just a throwaway in a conversation. This show's not quite like that. They're more straightforward. They're like most shows. But as explicit as they were with the spoilers about what was going to happen tonight, I know that our man in the 21st Century Media Alliance, Platinum Smalls, has been telling me that the ratings have gone down a little bit this season, as apparently there's been a little bit of viewer dissatisfaction with the fact that, again, we've been saying all along this season so far hasn't been as great as season 4. Do you think they may have done something like that, putting the outright spoilers in there about him getting shot, maybe to juice the ratings? Because I'll bet you anything the ratings are back up tonight.
Probably.
Okay.
You got to realize that as we're talking about this, and as informed fanboys or whatever you want to call it, we're watching this and we're reacting to it. But behind the scenes, I'm sure there's plenty of people at FX that were pissed in the bed when they realized that the ratings were down X amount or whatever. To us, who cares? I mean, it's funny, you make some wrestling references from time to time. The one that I picked up on is the diehards are going to be there no matter what, and that's who we are. So, I mean, people like us, people that tune in and schedule their lives around what happens on Tuesday night, they're going to watch no matter what. I don't care if the teaser made it look like one of the more boring episodes. I was still going to watch it. So maybe to some extent they're tipping their hand just so that they can try to win back some people. I don't think they have anything to worry about in the long run because the show's going to run its course. It's FX. I don't know how much advertising is getting hurt by the fluctuation, but I don't think it's a big deal. But real quick, to go back to what you were saying in my reaction, I just thought you'd find this entertaining. My wife is in there with my 2-year-old son playing behind closed doors so that I'm not bothering them. And more than once, she opened the door to yell out, "Who are you talking to?" And my response is, "The TV." So there were plenty of reactions going around tonight.
Once again, I wish we had audio and video footage of that at that point in time. It's funny because, again, we've let off most of this season talking about Boyd because he's been on the more interesting journey of the two, really up until about now. And you could say, too, there was a lot of fascination with Boyd tonight. What happened with Ava was compressed into just a few scenes, so we're used to talking about Boyd first as we're going through on the reactions for this. I almost think we should talk about him last just to make sure we can carve out enough room, because with Ava, there were just a couple of scenes that involved her. It probably won't take us long to get through those. The aftermath of what happened, of the stabbing of Judith last week in self-defense, and the sense that she now is marked by Judith's followers there. I've never seen anyone giving someone extra ice cream as being a particularly ominous mark for death kind of a thing here. But that old cafetorium scene there toward the end really put a different spin on the whole Orange is the New Black storyline Ava's been on this year.
Rick, that was one of the things I was hoping we'd have time for, even if it was just a little quick drive-by on this. One of those times where I spoke out loud through the television was, like most people, you see the girls get up that had been giving her grief before in episodes previous, walking up, and then, of course, there's this moment where you're like, oh, here we go, girl can't catch a break. And then all of a sudden the first ice cream cup goes down, and I literally sat up in my chair and went, oh, look at Ava Crowder, big queen bitch of the jail yard. So I thought it was actually kind of a cool gesture with the whole ice cream thing.
So you took it the other way, that she's the new queen bee now? She knocked off the queen, and they're now following her? I must say, if that's the case, you and I read that completely differently.
Well, I'll say this. It may have just been a gesture and nothing more. But on the light side, it's just gesture. But yeah, something tells me that they would not just they don't get up one at a time and sort of do the whole like Rudy needs to play, coach put him in my spot, here's my jersey alignment one after the other. If it's just to say, hey, that was slick. And I don't know a whole lot about jail culture, and I'm pretty happy about that. But something tells me that when they get up like that in a procession and give a token of whatever, I don't know if they're necessarily saying that they're paying their allegiance, but maybe they're saying, okay, no one's going to mess with you for a while, at minimum. So, like I said, on the low end, it's a nice gesture. On the high end, maybe she's untouchable. Maybe she's the new whatever. I don't know. But that moment was extremely intriguing.
That is really fascinating. We're going to have to mark this point in time here and come back on this and see how it plays out and compare it to your perspective and to my perspective, because I got to tell you, I was getting a completely different vibe, which was like a last dinner kind of a thing. Might as well fatten up on as much ice cream as you want, Ava. It ain't going to matter where you're going. That's exactly what I was getting. I was getting the whole
that very well
could
be the case, too, though.
Okay.
And
is it possible for an amalgam? Is there some amalgam between your perspective and mine? I can't imagine.
You know, like this, like load up on ice cream for your last dinner. We respect what you did, but you're gonna die. that's where the predictions converge right there, man. Yeah, I don't know what it means, and that's the beauty of this is that countless times this season alone, there's been a moment where you and I look at something and have a very specific reaction to it, and they're not always the same. So it will be interesting to see what that means. Whether that just says, hey, live it up for the next couple hours because they're your last, or all hail the new queen. Who knows? And that'll definitely be interesting to see unfold.
Well, it's just interesting. It's a milestone in what we've been doing here, 11 episodes in, because I don't know that there's a scene that is going to be such an important one when it's all said and done that you and I have seen completely differently here. So most of the time we've kind of read things a lot the same way. So I'm really, really just intrigued here to see how this plays out, because you got one guess, I got another, and you know what, knowing these writers, it might be option C that kind of stuns both of us. But Ava is, I'm sure, in the last 2 episodes here going to have this arc tied up. I was reading some spoilers that indicated that we're probably not going to be looking at Ava in prison next year. And that's just a probable, and that's probably just generally what the writers are saying. But I think we knew that anyways. One way or another, this was going to play itself out. So to a certain extent, they weren't telling us anything that we didn't already know. As far as it goes with Boyd Crowder here, again, it's unusual that it takes us this long to get to him, but the attempted assassination of Art Mullen is such a big and jarring event on the landscape. That's what it would take to drive Boyd to this part of the program as far as us discussing it. He goes through everything with Wynn Duffy and with the widow, who is played to great effect by Mary Steenburgen, as far as being evaluated, him versus Picker. And the first meeting that they had, of course, broken up by the marshals when they were trying to conduct the investigation on who shot Art. They subsequently end up meeting later on. I don't know if Boyd necessarily had the same cigarette pack with him both times. I'm guessing he didn't. I'm guessing that the marshals probably would have come across that. Second time through, there was, of course, the explosives. Picker's jawing at him from the other side of the room, hearing about how Boyd needs to die. He couldn't get the job done. Ends up catching the cigarette pack that's got some explosives in it. I love moments like that, just knowing that you're watching, just once again imagining your reaction. So first of all, tell me what that consisted of. And second of all, tell me where you think this is going now with Boyd or with Wynn.
Well, little background. In our living room, we have a recliner that is much larger than most people's. And I would say you could probably fit at least 2 average people width-wise in it. So a lot of times you're almost like laying in it sideways. And I was in the right, next to the right armrest as I am right now. watching that, and I see you're enveloping yourself in the whole Boyd Crowder-ness of it, the dialogue, if you're using 2 words when you could use 10 and you're just being lazy kind of approach to things. Watching this, I'm seeing the cigarette thing, and I remember him, I've seen him smoke before, at least I think I have. So it wasn't a big deal, and then there's that moment when he holds the pack face out picker. Now, I've been around enough smokers to know there's ways that you hold things and ways you don't, and I thought, he's holding that pack really awkwardly. And then when he takes his finger and presses into the label, I literally jumped from the right armrest to the left armrest and almost fell out of the chair and said to the TV, not necessarily too loud, but said out loud, "Oh, Picker's about to die." Because I don't know what it was, but it looked like he pressed something that would be bomb-related, and then all of a sudden your brain, in a fraction of a second, goes flying back to his experience with explosives back in the mining days. And then for like 0.2 of a second, you're on the edge of your seat. And then when it happens, it's exciting. You jump out of your chair and go, "Oh, my goodness, he said Picker's dead." And then there's like, okay, Picker's dead. No need to choose between the two anymore. What does this mean? How do they clean up? Your brain in justified mode just goes crazy. But that was the reaction. Was I literally jumped from one side of this chair to the other, and it's probably as wide as some love seats. So we're not talking like startled. I literally leapt out of my seat. What that means, though, different discussion. When Boyd first got the cigarettes and said something about, "I don't know why I ever quit," and there needs to be some changes made, you kind of get the impression maybe we're going back to old Boyd, which would be interesting. I definitely think that Boyd is making an attempt to assert himself as being more important, more in control, and more dominant than anyone that was in that room. And that includes, no, I can't think of his name now. Not Picker, the other guy.
Wynn and Picker?
Yeah. So to this point, Boyd's almost been satisfied to play sort of second fiddle to Wynn Duffy and tolerate Picker. The Picker thing is over with. And now I think he's asserting himself to basically say if anybody is going to answer to anybody, it's going to be Wynn Duffy answering to Boyd. Now, where that goes is a whole other episode. And I think we'll actually see that play out probably sooner than later. The Mary Steenburgen part is interesting because I get that she's got a past. I get that it's someone that Duffy thinks that he can trust. I don't know what kind of an impact she's going to have long term, though. I do think that the Boyd-Duffy thing feels like it's coming to a close by the time the season's over, which goes back to a point that we collectively kind of made a few episodes ago, and that was that maybe we find ourselves in a place where season 6 has a whole new Boyd Crowder, and he becomes, again, the big bat that we always kind of regarded him as in season 6, thus pushing the envelope for some big epic finale to the series.
That sounds very believable. I can see that as a very credible scenario. I will say, and this was a thing that I had read that the creators of the show had put out in the last couple of days, spoiler alert, that Mary Steenburgen will be around next season as well. She has signed on for that, and so she's going to continue to be associated with Wynn Duffy. Her character is some great banter back and forth. I mean, you talk about the dialogue and the banter on this show. Her and AUSA Vasquez, that was absolutely outstanding back there at the station, so to speak, as they were going at it. And it just, again, there was a lot of dialogue gold in this episode, as there always is. And, Boyd always accounts for, seemingly at least 60% of it. And, again, I think that I was reading recently that Walt Goggins was saying is that Tim Oliphant, being an executive producer as well as the lead actor on the call sheet, very, very generous with a lot of the best material, and that the writers will come up with stuff, and that Oliphant will be pushing to disperse it to other people when and if he feels that it's a good thing to do. And Goggins expressed his appreciation for that, and certainly his delivery of Boyd's material is par excellence. I go back to earlier in the season when you were talking about when there was a certain line about I've been called many things in my life. Uneloquent is not one of them. You said that if you were like an extra working on set, that you would have come up and high-fived when they yelled cut. So Boyd's delivery is just truly, I go back, I think about that when he delivers lines like this. His delivery was just outstanding. That scene there, I mean, outside of Art getting shot, probably the second most impactful scene of the night. Maybe you could say second most impactful would be the showdown at the end with Daryl Crow and with Raylan. I must confess, as far as that goes, I wasn't picking up on that immediately where that was going. The fact that Daryl had set it up for the kid to take the rap, how quickly did it take you to pick up on that?
Seriously? That
as
was
far
actually, like in real time.
Yeah.
My first reaction was Daryl comes in with Kendall in front. And I thought it was literally like a physical, like human shield on the off chance someone's going to try to shoot Daryl right away. They'd hesitate with the kid in front. The second, and I'm not exaggerating to put myself over in any way, the second that I always want to remember how the heck you say it, but ASUS, whatever, the attorney guy.
AUSA Vasquez, yeah.
That guy comes in and looks at Kendall and says that Daryl said that there's something you want to tell us. Boom. Right then, in that moment, I was absolutely sold 100% on the fact that they were going to spin a web that puts this all on Kendall because he would only get juvie, and it would allow Daryl to sort of be free for at least the time being, and it would go back to last week's episode where Daryl emphatically demands to know if Kendall is a Crow or not, basically insinuating that he's going to have to prove his loyalty at some point. So to me, the moment they said, is there something you need to tell us, I kind of knew where that was going. If anything, I hesitated on Daryl Crow's whole situation with Raylan at the elevator. That made me kind of second-guess some things for a hot second. But as far as Kendall, the whole Kendall angle, I was on board with that almost immediately.
Good for you, because it took me a little bit longer, clearly, to pick up on what was going on with that. Something I wonder about also, too, we've had many different false alarms through the course of the season as far as Wendy Crow being the one to either drop a dime on her brother or in some way or another facilitate his downfall. It didn't happen in this episode, even after he beat the crap out of her last week. He crossed that line. I think with her, the ultimate line probably is anything happening to the young man acknowledged now as her son, not her younger brother, Kendall. If she gets wind of what Daryl did in this, that Kendall actually wasn't the one that fired those shots, ultimately, is that what brings Wendy into the mix as far as helping to bring down Daryl? You got to think that's the case. You got to think that's the last straw of all of the straws at this point.
Reaction number 4 of the night. We're led to believe that Raylan is going to this location so that he can bring in Daryl. And the moment you realize that that is not the case, I leaned forward and very quietly and very politely said out loud, "You are just a habitual liar, and I hope harm comes to you." I am so tired of Wendy just trying to be, good and then absolutely screwing over the authorities. But with that said, you're absolutely right. There's got to be a point where there's a line drawn in the sand where she says, that family don't mean much. Not going forward and not if it involves selling Kendall up the creek. So I think that absolutely they've set that up so that she will find out. And when she does, I'm pretty sure she will offer up any information at all that she can get convince not only our boys to go pick up Daryl, but to put him away for a long time, if that'll get Kendall off the hook for something he didn't do.
I'm just going to go on a limb here and put out a prediction, and that being that she will be having a conversation with Kendall where it will become clear to her that Kendall was making up the story. Maybe he's going to get a detail wrong or something in the telling of the story to her, and that because Kendall, again, I think at this point is going to be steadfast. He's not dropping a dime on Uncle Daryl willingly, but my guess is that she comes to find out something more or less by accident, and that may play a role in the unraveling of this. So again, we've had sort of, I guess you could say in retrospect, all season. I mean, you go back to the season opener, it has sort of, in one way or another, been building to Daryl versus Raylan. I suppose there'll be a lot of people who will say, once this is all said and done, well, it really was more clear than you guys were making it out to be. It was Raylan versus Daryl. And in the end, it may prove to be the case. But again, they've kind of gotten away from that as a central focus for most of the season. I think it's fair to say Raylan didn't spend a whole lot of hours thinking about Daryl Crow much between episodes 1 and episode 11. It just kind of happened to play out that way subsequently, and it will in the end game of the series. I don't generally ask you this question because I generally have a lot of confidence that just in the normal realm of conversation that we're going to hit everything that needs to be hit. But there were a number of major developments tonight. I know at the beginning of the conversation here, you had alluded to a number of things that you wanted to get to. So I have the sense that perhaps we haven't hit all of those yet at this point in time. So in the remaining 5 to 6 minutes we have left, are there any things that we haven't covered yet that you thought of as being very important tonight?
Let's be honest, we don't have enough time for us to go through every little sub-point along the way. The important stuff was what is happening with Ava. Does she turn the corner? Does this mean that she's, untouchable, or does this mean there's certain harm about to befall her? At which, if that's the case, then we got to find a way to get her out before this thing goes bad. Reverting back to old Boyd and everything that Boyd did. I mean, the little bomb in the cigarette thing was cool enough, but this was a Boyd episode. Maybe not so much in plot points, but just every scene he's in is just classic Boyd, and it was phenomenal to watch. The art thing is huge. What this means for Raylan, I guess the one thing we kind of just glossed over, let me just insert this in, just in case anyone creating the show comes across it. Can we please get a little more action from Mr. Tim Gutterson? I'm tired of just like 3 lines an episode. But putting that aside, we speculated a while ago as to who would replace Art if that ever was to come. And we find out today that at least in the interim, it's going to be Rachel, which in hindsight probably isn't a huge revelation. But the question remains, what kind of office is it with Rachel running the show as opposed to Art? Or, God forbid, if we even were to fathom what it would be like if Raylan ran it. But with Rachel, I get the impression that maybe there may be some small level changes, some nuanced differences in how the office is run.
I would tend to think so, and again, as she's alluded to previously, there are things that she puts up with Raylan because she has to, because they're on the same level. She's going to pick her battles rather than making an issue out of every last thing she's dissatisfied with. Hey, now she has the whip hand. Now she's the boss for however long, and there are things that she doesn't necessarily have to take from Raylan if she doesn't want to. So I would agree with you on that, and again, the fact that it's her instead of Tim Gutterson, it's the smart character choice, I think, because of that, because of some of the PTSD things that have been hinted at and even joked about by Tim Gutterson. But I will join you in bemoaning that it's not him selfishly just because it would get him some more screen time. The great Jacob Pitts, really vastly underutilized on this show. One of the criticisms that I would share with you, needs to be more Gutterson on this show, probably will be towards the end. They always tend to get the other marshals in the office carried up in part of the big season finale storyline here, and as it finishes building to Raylan versus Daryl Crow Jr., that probably will be the case. And now with Boyd Crowder as the wild card in all of this. We saw in the preview that he comes into the offices next week and apparently is trying to hold himself up as a big hero. I would presume for the hunt for Darryl Crow and trying to get him. So the convergence between Boyd and Raylan there is going to be very, very interesting through the last two episodes. We talked about it last week. They were going to need a really, really huge run of 3 episodes to close the season to have any hope of being as great as season 4. They took a big step forward tonight. Do you think they still need 2 pretty big episodes if they want to get to that level?
Well, creatively, I would love to see it. I would love for them, using our crossovers, to go and look at the final season of Breaking Bad and what that did for ratings and what that did to change the way maybe some people want to make television, and look at it and said, let's do the show, however, until we get to a point where we can just hit them with like a few consecutive episodes where one is better than the previous one until this great climactic conclusion. I would love for that to be the case, but I think, going back to your earlier point today, of if they end this season right, the season will be a success, even if episode to episode wasn't as phenomenal or linear as, say, season 2, 3, and 4 were. I think they can have a regression next week. I think they can come back a little bit, have it less action-packed, but they have to set up a huge, huge cliffhanger to lead into the season finale. You can have an A-graded episode today and have like a B- next week and come out with an A+ next week and still be phenomenal. Now, I don't think this crew has the potential or even the capacity to drop the ball completely. So I think it's either going to be incredible for the next 3 weeks, or they'll jump around again and set us up for a great finale. But I think you're looking at a great finale either way.
I certainly think that is the case. By the way, credit where credit is due. We spent a little bit of time critiquing in the last couple of weeks the Hollerback podcast, our colleagues in the Justified podcast community here. I want to commend them. A couple of strong weeks in a row after they took their ball and went home after 5.8 and did the 3-minute podcast. A couple of strong efforts the last couple of weeks here. I'm not at all being sarcastic or facetious when I say that. I certainly hope they keep it up. I'm going to be interested to check out their work from this week to see if that's still the case. And with an honest effort from them, as they've shown the last couple of weeks, I'm sure it will be very good as well. I feel that we had another great one here today, my friend. I can't wait to break down 512 with you, the penultimate episode next week. Really looking forward to it, my man.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for tuning in, everybody. Mini episode number 401 of the FDH Lounge.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and The Periodic Table of Elements.